Welcome to this journey where we dialogue with thought and heart leaders to share their reflections on human condition and how to improve them.
So welcome, sir. Welcome to this journey.
Thank you, Hemant.
Yeah. We have this small tradition of starting the interaction with our guest, with taking them back in their memory lane to their childhood. It would be wonderful to learn from you some of your early childhood memories.
Okay. First of all, you don't have to call me sir. You can call me Ram.
Okay.
And I consider myself very fortunate for several reasons. For instance, even though I was born and brought up in a small village in Tamil Nadu, it's called Jeevapuram. He gave me an opportunity to learn Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and so on early on in my life. And it also gave me an insight to certain lifestyles which you don't get to see today. And like I said, I am very fortunate because I was able to get into engineering in Tamil Nadu, and the fees those days were 100 rupees or something per semester. And my father was able to put me and my sister in engineering while he was working as a clerk. That speaks to the efficiency and the cost effectiveness of our education system.
Wow.
I'm a beneficiary of the Indian education system.
Interesting.
And I may have gone to these fancy colleges in the West, but everything that I do today is a direct consequence of what I learned in my undergrad, and I got to thank my professors in undergrad and my high school teachers. So they mold me into who I am today.
Interesting.
So, yeah, the Western education helped. It helped me establish contacts and so on and so forth. But the core of what I do today is a result of what I learned here in India.
Interesting. Interesting. Sir, anything that you could draw some similarities or distinctions that you saw between the education system here, and obviously there you were doing the higher education, so there is no direct comparison because here you were not doing the higher education. But could you be drawing anything that there were similarities or differences that were very stark?
The stark differences were one, in India, we have been spoon-fed. So many things are done on our behalf by our professors. We don't take the initiative to do things ourselves. So things are, given to us in a very concise manner. Nobody says, oh, read this book, you try to understand, extract what is important out of this, digest it, synthesize it, and then get back to me. Whereas in the West, though some of it is done in some institutions, the Western style of education itself is oriented towards self-motivated, self-preparation and those kind of things where the students have to put a lot of work up front. Not too much is done on their behalf by the professors. So what it does is, it creates a culture of self-reliance rather than relying on somebody else. But there are advantages to the Indian style of education also, which is in an environment where technology is so rapidly evolving, when people don't have a lot of time to dive deep into each and every aspect of certain technologies, concise, professor-driven education seems to benefit some sectors of the society also. There are both goods and bads in all these things, but at some point in time, even our own education system, our pedagogy has to change. Our own education system has to change. And I do see that some of the IIMs are experimenting with some of these pedagogies that I was thinking about. So it is happening, but again, I don't think it's a good idea to compare our education system with the Western education system. The goals may be the same, but the means of achieving those goals, they differ.
Yeah, interesting. I remember chatting before we got here, the green room chat we were having, and you mentioned about certain practices that you saw as you were growing as a child in your own neighborhood. The interesting. It brought so much of vividness for me that you saw that people around were doing this shastrarth or a very different kind of philosophical argumentation. Can you share something about that?
Yeah, that's a very unusual environment that I was brought up in, the village that I was brought up in. It was a Vedic village. So I observed a lot of discussions on Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, the logic behind some of these things, disagreements, and for something to be true per Rig Veda, these things have to happen, and so on and so forth. What attracted to me was, one, the simplicity of the people. They were not driven by materialism. They were relentlessly seeking knowledge and wisdom. And every opportunity they had, they were trying to debate. They were trying to disagree. So what that told me was that particular village, the people were more interested in knowledge rather than probably self-enrichment through rituals or even performing these kind of things. So it gave me an insight into a different world. And when I look at the world today, where it is driven so much by materialism, where everybody wants the latest iPhone or the latest Android phone, where even the kids have been motivated into seeking happiness in these kind of things. Here was a village where the elders were leading a life of example, where people can look at it and say, oh, this kind of approach to happiness is also a possibility. That you don't see a lot nowadays anymore.
Yeah. I remember one of the anecdotes that you were sharing, one of these days, one of your friends actually advising you, why don't you change your car?
Yeah.
And you had a particular answer to it and philosophy behind it. And I believe that there is a direct correlation between how you saw the simplicity in childhood and the simplistic living that you are right now. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I told you earlier, I drive a very old car. It's a 2002 Honda Civic. It's very personally important to me because I bought that car brand new in 2002 to bring my daughter from hospital. She was just then born. That day I told my wife, I'm never going to sell this car because it reminds me of that event. It keeps running well, and then my friends who drive Mercedes and BMWs, they often ask me, hey, when do you get rid of this car and get a new one? It's so ugly from the outside. I tell them, I drive it from the inside. It is very comfortable for me. You look at it from outside. I don't care how it looks for you. See, the point is this. This kind of simplistic lifestyle has given me a lot of happiness. It has given me into insight about life, which otherwise I wouldn't have got it elsewhere. So that way of thinking or that approach to life, I guess, was incorporated into me early on in my life in this village. I'm so happy that I had that opportunity. That's why I started this conversation, claiming that I am very fortunate. Then, when my friends tell me that they have to continue working and they cannot experiment with entrepreneurship because they have all these liabilities, tell them, these liabilities you brought it on yourself. You went and bought a Mercedes and BMW, now you have to make the payments, and that is depriving you of an opportunity to experiment with entrepreneurship. Yes. You have to continue working. So, it appears to me there is more good to this lifestyle that I have than bad, because I seem to be extremely happy with this lifestyle and I wouldn't change it for anything.
You've been in some way you describe yourself as an avid researcher, and you've been over 3 decades researching this whole space of finance and technology, how they've been evolving. Can you share with us how has your journey been, and are there some interesting milestones that you think you could share with us in that?
Yeah, I was introduced to the world of finance by accident. A very interesting story. This again happened in Michigan. I was so cold in Michigan that if you want to take a walk, you better go to the mall and take a walk. So I was taking a walk in the Michigan mall. One day, a North Indian gentleman approaches me and asked me, "Aren't you a programmer?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, I have a requirement. I'm an options trader. I will teach you options trading if you write a program for me to keep track of my trades." I said, "Of course, do." So we did it, and then he taught me options trading. Then I asked him, why did you ask this question? Are you a programmer? So he said, you are an Indian, you are young, you got to be either a programmer or a doctor. So I thought I would ask you whether you are a programmer. I'm not in favor of stereotyping, but this positive stereotyping is something that I really,
positive effect
really helped me.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into finance, and I've been doing options trading since 1991. And tech has been my profession, ever since I graduated. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I chose to become a programmer. In fact, I took a salary cut to become a programmer. My very first job was after I took a salary cut to become a programmer and moved to a larger city. Everybody was asking me, why are you giving up a 2,000 rupees job and taking a 1,000 rupee job, that too in a bigger city where the rent itself is 800 rupees? I said, I like programming and I don't think I can be an engineer. Because if you get a job that is also your passion, every day is like going on a picnic. You don't feel that you're working. So I've worked in mainframes and I've worked in client server, then right now on the web technologies and apps and so on and so forth. What I realized of late is that the technological evolution is no more constrained to what large organizations can do. Now, the technology evolution has been democratized because of open source, cloud computing, and the advantage the West had because of infrastructure, that has been effectively utilized. So today it is a battle of the brains, and that is something Indians can do. So now innovation happens probably by someone who's sitting in some kind of a beach somewhere with a laptop connected to the cloud computing through Amazon. So the rate at which the innovation happens after cloud computing and the rate at which it was happening before cloud computing and open source, those are diametrically opposite.
Right.
So that is one major milestone. The other milestone was, personally for me, working in computers in India versus working in computers in the United States. The massiveness of the systems and applications, the user base, and that kind of a scale is not something, at least those days, I was exposed to in India. So that was another milestone. And a recent milestone for me was when I launched MyMoneyKarma along with my co-founder, which is where we had to do certain things to take care of this rapid scaling that we didn't even anticipate. We anticipated that we would be successful, but the rate at which our customer base grew was a big surprise even for us. And then that was one crucial milestone for us where we had to start digging deep technologically to see how to manage this kind of requirement, the customer growth.
So, in fact, having more customers than expected is a nice problem to have. I would like to take forward this interesting concept that you mentioned, democratization of technology. In fact, India has been quite lucky on this front, where we are now taking advantage of the technological advancements, and particularly say telephony, where we never put any copper wires, but we have switched over to fiber without putting any investment. Similar things are happening in finance world also. In fact, technology is a great enabler, and fintech area actually is throwing open a lot of opportunities in India. The financial inclusion that we are talking about, or offering financial products and reaching it, making it accessible, affordable, etc. I think a lot is happening in India. I would be very happy to hear from you what more can be done. I mean, in case I'm sure you are familiar with the entire spectrum of activities which are happening in fintech world in India. How can we benefit further from the technological revolution and offering technology at the doorstep along with the product or a service which is of use to that end consumer? And how do we benefit from understanding that we draw from advanced countries where you have worked?
See, technology, in my opinion, is a double-edged sword. Personally, because of my background and because of, or at least the way I understand about India, I personally feel that before we jump into that, we need to see the negative impact of technological adaptation. Okay. You know, even in the West, people have started talking about universal basic income because there is this fear that application of technology is going to result in more and more job losses. Pretty close to, they're saying 30% of the jobs that exist today can be automated.
Yeah.
Which means 30% of the workforce need to be either retrained or given new job opportunities or some kind of a UBI and those kind of things. Okay. Now that's a major problem for a country like ours. But that is no reason to say, oh, we shouldn't automate any further. Okay. Now these two have to go hand in hand here. Now, as far as areas where we can really improve, one is today banks are used to making a lot of profits. And there is not a lot of incentive for them to change anything, alter the current situation, unless they are guaranteed that introduction of technology is actually going to help them better. Now that can happen two ways. One, competition can drive them to do it. For that to happen, they may have to wait until competition comes into existence. Or proactively, people go convince them that if you don't do it, then fintech companies are going to probably start dominating and then you may be late to the game. So either way, they have to do it. But areas where they can really do some of these things is, some of it is already happening. For instance, in loan approval processes.
Yeah.
If they can use technology and make sure that loans are approved, within a day or two, if they can look at that as a target goal or something, that is one thing they can do. And there is this section of the population that is now not served by these major banks. So that is the reason why we see this non-banking, organizations or these organizations, the cooperative banks and those kind of banks, those are offering loans. So there is this section of the society that is really underserved today.
True.
And their ability to pay loans and their credit scores and their credit information may not be available everywhere. The banks may have to use technology to figure out the credit worthiness of individuals. And they may have to move from the traditional or the conventional methods they have applied and use technology to apply better methods so that they can bring more customers into mainstream. Now, these two could be a good start for banks. And the third thing could be whether legislatively we as a country can do things that can reduce risks on the bank's side when they incorporate some of these things. Okay, for example, the financial inclusion that you are talking about is a major first step. Whether such things could be incorporated legislatively with the government support so that banks can confidently implement some of these newer technologies. That's a win-win situation where the banks could probably start making more profit. The customers can receive better customer service. They may be able to receive growth, which indirectly helps the economy.
Right.
And you're seeing a lot of a flurry of activity happening in this space. So many fintech coming and setting up shops in India. How do you see this space? Because there are too many players. It seems, or maybe the argument could be that the number of people who are underserved or wrongly served, or there is an improvement possibility is too large, and hence the need for so many players to jostle for the pie. What would be your opinion on that?
See, in any scenario, whenever these newer technologies emerge, there will be a rush from
Different.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurs are each. There is some statistics. This is what I am a PhD in entrepreneurship. I don't remember this statistic. Majority of the entrepreneurs fail. Whereas if you ask the entrepreneurs, none of the entrepreneurs think they would fail. So entrepreneurs are different kind of people. They are very optimistic people. So this rush into fintech by entrepreneurs is understandable. And that is what is so unique about any entrepreneurial ecosystem. The entrepreneurs think that they are going to succeed. Okay. And there is no shame in attempting something and then failing entrepreneurially. That's why I don't believe in this phrase entrepreneurial failure. There's nothing called entrepreneurial failure. As soon as someone becomes an entrepreneur, they are successful. So, yes, like in every other thing, I don't know if you remember, maybe you are too young, you may remember in the year 2000 how the technology industry crashed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, everybody wanted to be a technology company. Everybody said, oh, we are a web development company. We are into
.coms.
So the .com bust has told us already, has indicated to us already that this is what really happens. This is how, entrepreneurial ventures consolidate. But that is not to say 1,000 people shouldn't attempt because only 4 people ultimately succeed.
Yeah.
But what I see here is, because of technology, there could be room for multiple players in this section. Because one, if you just consider India, the consumer base is humongous. And if you consider our economic growth, I mean, if you set aside this recent 6%, 5%, 6% growth, even today in economic times, they said the long term it is going to be about 7.5% to 8%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a very small blip in the economic growth. So considering these factors and considering the fact that the next generation is technologically savvy, and nobody may want to go to the bank or nobody want to go and talk to a personal investment advisor, since there is going to be technological application in all these areas, there should be room for multiple players here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, partially you are right. There is a rush into everybody wanting to be in the fintech area. But because of these factors, I would say still quite a good number of these entrepreneurs will succeed. And there will be room for acquisition. And acquisition is not a failure. Yes, but the most important thing is the speed with which these people deliver. That is very crucial.
Correct.
So I'm very positive. Every entrepreneur should.
Competition is good in some sense.
Entrepreneurs should try.
Yeah.
There
have been also a lot of talks in the if we go down the rabbit hole of algorithmic world, there are talks of the confirmation bias in the algorithm and similar such challenges that would throw up. And because you're talking technology, you're talking these things happening at scale. Would you want to speak to something like that?
Yes, that is an issue.
Okay.
But like in every other technology, these issues will arise. But the first thing is we need to admit that these issues exist. Then we need to find solutions. For instance, recently I was reading Amazon was not delivering after 6 p.m. in certain zip codes in the United States. Only to realize that the algorithm was not discriminatory. The crime rate in those zip codes were higher. So algorithm said, we're not going to deliver after 6 p.m. And it's also so happened that in those zones, the population was predominantly African American. So it appeared as though the algorithm is discriminating. But the algorithm is saying, I don't have emotions. The algorithm is saying the data tells me this. The data tells me that beyond 6 p.m., it's not advisable to go deliver in these neighborhoods.
It's looking at the crime marker versus the race marker,
right?
In that sense.
So it is looking only at the crime marker.
Yeah.
But the crime marker also has some kind of a correlation to the race marker.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, but see, the most important thing is the fact that we have identified and recognized these issues in algorithms and talking about them. See, Amazon also is a for-profit company.
Okay.
So they have to figure out how to defeat such algorithms, right, or how to put checks in place so that these algorithms don't deny them business opportunity.
Absolutely. It's a business interest.
Yes. So it is in their best interest to make sure that such issues are fixed in the algorithms.
One of the things that you've been proponent of and you've done research and you talk about in some of your talks is the CEO of 2030. You caricaturing this in a certain way and you're giving a certain direction to it. Could you take us through and help us understand how would a CEO 10 years back, which let's say 2010 and 2020, 10 years hence, what do you think are the stark differences that you see, and what would you allude those, the difference in the CEO requirements to?
There are two things that I can at least think of right now. One is technological evolution. The CEO 20 years back versus the CEO in 2030. They are dealing with different levels of technological application. Okay. So whether a CEO, how technically or technologically savvy a CEO was 20 years back versus how one may have to be 10 years from now, those are two different things. In other words, I don't think 10 years from now, by 2030, a CEO can afford to be technologically not savvy. Then the other thing is, if you look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem that existed 20 years back versus what it exists now, which produces companies of the future, and where these organizations are produced by people in their mid-20s. For instance, 20 years back, the average age of a CEO versus the average age of a CEO in 2030, the adaptation or the application of machine learning in 2030 versus what it was 20 years back. Probably 20 years back, machine learning was non-existent.
Absolutely.
So all these things are going to make a substantial. Then there is this other important thing, gender. 20 years back, I don't know how many women CEOs existed versus in 2030, how many women CEOs will exist. But if you just take into account today, even though the percentage of women CEOs, even in an advanced nation like the United States, is only about probably 10%. Women still have inherent disadvantages when it comes to occupying CEO positions. Recently, I read that women take 30% longer to become CEOs. And even upon becoming CEOs, their gender parity is not achieved. Even after becoming CEOs, they are 40% more likely to be fired than a male. And this is despite the fact that those organizations with women in C-suites make about 2% more profits or 2% more revenues. Still, it is more difficult for a lady to become a CEO, achieve the position of a CEO, and then continue operating as a CEO. So those gender imbalances may have been removed or at least substantially reduced by 2030.
Right. I also remember one of the anecdotes that you were sharing, and you were mentioning that a lot of the challenges that we see in the world today has a very strong sociological underpinning. In fact, in the example that you just gave, also in Women CEO, I'm sure there are a lot of sociological underpinnings to it. Would you want to expand on your reading of the sociological challenges of the time?
If I were to compare the sociological underpinnings of problems in India versus in the United States. So, for example, take entrepreneurship. So many people here in India are unable to become entrepreneurs because of the sociological issues. For instance, single men are afraid of becoming entrepreneurs because it may impact their marriage, or whether they may even get married or not. And a failure, entrepreneurial failure, whether the stigma of failure, which is dependent on the society. There is a lower level of stigma of failure in the West versus a higher level here. That is a major concern. So I have been telling that so many problems that we have today have a sociological underpinning, unless we address them. And one of the reasons why the sociological underpinning exists because of the misunderstanding we have about our own selves, our own culture. people are claiming that they are victims of our culture. That is because they have never understood what our culture really is. There is no, our culture didn't train us that to be ashamed of entrepreneurial failure. This is something that was brought upon on us by ourselves. So the culture has nothing to do with it. And this obsession with, a status through education or status through money and those kind of things were not a consequence of who we are culturally. Those were things that we assumed or we just blindly adopted, probably following the West or whatever. So the sociological problems exist, but the root cause of these problems is not our culture, even though it exists in our culture. The root cause is the colossal misunderstanding we have of our culture. So, but if we head on address these problems, the sociological issues, then yes, we can get out of this constraint that we have imposed on us ourselves.
Interesting.
I'll just come back to artificial intelligence. In those earlier days, it was said that artificial intelligence will replace natural stupidity, and more so particularly for the decision making that involved in playing with data and market information, etc. Good part of this analytics and good part of this distinct understanding is likely to come from machine learning and artificial intelligence. For future scenario, say 10 years down the line, and particularly at a senior level, by all means, technical skills will be very relevant and very critical. What other skills, and particularly when you talked about sociological dimension to every management role and responsibility, particularly with reference to C-suite people, how would you see them, or rather, how would you visualize them using their non-technical skills, and what kind of those skills you would visualize them to possess?
Well, I've often said in the past, technologies change, people who work in the companies change, but human nature doesn't change, at least not in the short term. It may take thousands of years because of evolution and so on. So, having said that, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the application of analytics and so on and so forth for decision making, these things make human relationships much more important than ever before. So, for a CEO in the future, or for even C-suite officers, or even the any corporate manager for that matter, the interpersonal relationships, how they manage people, because especially in India, I have seen that the management style is, I don't know if you've heard of this power distance and these kind of things. It's not very collaborative. See, I'm a 57-year-old guy. I have people who work for me who are 25 and 26, and these are young, bright guys from IITs and non-IITs also. Even though I am the CTO of the company, and even though I have 30 years experience in IT, I have to give consideration to whatever my subordinates, my direct reportees are recommending to me, because they have more up-to-date knowledge of the current technology. They are younger, I'm very sorry to admit it, but they are much wiser than I was at their age. So I have to give credence to all these things and then work collaboratively with the boys. That is something that is lacking in India that I see. We still believe that managing through unidirectional flow of information, we tell people do this, do that. Which means even in this technological era, working closely with people, human interaction, and understanding not just people's needs technologically, but understanding what they want to do, where they want to go in their profession, and engaging them on a person-to-person basis is is more important than ever before because the rest of the things are going to be taken care of by technology. So, if anything, the leaders and the CEOs of the future have to have very good interpersonal skills. That is something they have to identify early on, ask themselves whether they have it or not. And if they don't have it, admit that they don't have it and work towards cultivating it. It is so important because the skills that may be required for the future is, for example, negotiations and those kind of skills. Yeah, you can use machine learning, you can use simulations, you can use analytics and so on to get some basic pointers. But then when you engage, it is ultimately these skills that is going to make important decisions.
Interesting. Would you want to share a little bit about your own venture right now? How did it start? And what's happening in the venture right now and the ecosystem around it?
Okay, so I started MyMoneyKarma with my Stanford classmate. We were sitting together one day in Stanford, and then we started discussing. He has been the VP of Consumer Finance here in a leading bank here in India, and then he had come to the Stanford Business School to study. So we were sitting and talking one day, and then as we started talking, we realized that there is this huge opportunity in India in Fintech. And he was asking me whether I would be the CTO. And, I had lived in the US at that time for almost 25 years, and I didn't have not good understanding or much knowledge about the Indian consumers. Whereas he had a mastery of that area, and I had a mastery in technology. So we thought we will put it together and then start this organization. We started it in end of 2018, I guess. We are mid-2018, end of 2018. And the great thing about our company is this. This is something I was telling even the class today. It is very difficult to find co-founders who understand each other so well that we respect each other's decision without questioning them. We have so much confidence in each other. And the other thing is clear understanding as to who is capable of what and admitting who is not capable of what is so important. And we both were very clear about that. And above all, the chemistry and the similarity in mindset, what we want in life ultimately. Because I remember after the first conversation, we both concluded that this is an opportunity to do both good and well. Because one is, yes, there is a huge profit potential here, but then we also realized we could help so many people who have never invested in equities, who have never gone through a systematic procedure of applying loans, comparing and so on and so forth. So there we realized that we could bring more people into the ecosystem and also give them an opportunity to do things that they've never done before. So that was the attractive part of it. I remember that statement, yeah, let's do good and well also.
Interesting.
In fact, 6 months back, we had organized a lecture by one of the youth school marketing prof. And the topic of the session was this, that it's not only sufficient to do good, we should also be doing well. And he was, of course, referring to social marketing, and he had various examples to club this. Looking at fintech area, if we really wish to add value and if we really wish to ensure that financial inclusion reaches the last man with the best possible product and the services at the most affordable cost, what kind of changes that you would like to see in the current ecosystem, or what kind of suggestion you would like to offer which can really make it fast, make it rapid, and make it possibly more successful? I mean, of course, the government agenda also.
Oh, one is openness. Yeah. Okay. The free flow of information, so that everybody knows upfront what they are getting into and what the approval process is, what is required, what is not required. And to do that successfully, there's got to be a certain amount spent of time and money in consumer education. It is very important because, see, consumers, sometimes they don't know what they don't know.
True.
That is, that is the major problem. They say there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns, okay? There are too many unknown unknowns. So, what is consumer education? So, by educating the consumers, banks can also benefit. Because then they are not going to waste a lot of time processing applications that may never get approved or whatever. That is one thing. The other thing is, the banks may be able to offer better services.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they find more profit opportunities with the customer, but more long-term engagement of the customer. They look at a customer, profile the customer appropriately and ethically. Practice things ethically and they'll say, okay, yes, we want to push product A, but product B is better for this customer. If product B gives us less profit margin than product A, do we push product A or product B? That is a decision banks have to make. Rather than banks making those decisions, what I suggest is give enough information to the customer so that your conscience is free. You say, okay, I'm not making the decision for you. You are making the decision for yourself. So, the banks can claim that they have done their jobs responsibly. And by doing so, the consumer becomes a repeat customer. So the profits may not be short-term, but profits would be long-term and even more, even better. And the customer satisfaction will also be better.
Yeah. It's giving information to consumers so that the consumer is empowered to take the decision. To me, sounded more like the doctors most of the time. They wanting to give the information to the patient and telling them that these are the procedural pros and cons, and then you take the decision.
Right.
So it's in that spirit you're talking about?
That is in that spirit. Then the other thing is also, there's some way of standardizing documents. Whether there can be some kind of an intermediary agency set up by the government where all banks can go seek information pertaining to the customer, rather than going to the individual customers and each customer giving documents in various forms and formats. And so
a DMAT kind of a centralized DMAT depository kind of a
repository of information where, of course, the criticality of this is, security, information security.
Yeah.
So recently you heard that the United States is suing somebody in China who had stolen information about so many people in the United States, credit information.
Right.
But in fact, that brings us to another interesting aspect of these all pervasive technology platforms and at times quite invasive of individual proprietary information. Security and cyber crimes also may continue to grow at the same pace as positive technology or algorithms or artificial intelligence growing in providing better solutions and better products. What kind of precautions can we take when we are sharing so much of information? So much of information, individual personal information is available, and particularly financial information is quite vulnerable. What can be done by countries like India when US is vulnerable? I'm sure India, China would probably be far more vulnerable on that front. Would you have any suggestion towards containing that or restricting that, making it more manageable?
Well, I mean, if you look at the root cause of all these things, you will see that quite often it is the human error that is leading to all kinds of. See, for instance, whether the data is encrypted and stored or not is a decision that right now it is made at the company. If there is some kind of a policy somewhere that states, these kinds of information must be encrypted and stored. And some kind of a verification mechanism to do that. But any of these data leaks, for instance, recently happened, What has happened was somebody had a username and a password, admin and admin. So quite often it appears to be human error. And the companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google, for the matter, the leading cloud providers, they have been patching their applications and patching their systems almost on a hourly basis for security codes. Okay, not too many things have happened because of issues actually with software. Most of these things seem to have happened because of human error, and that can be controlled, or that I don't know if it can be completely eliminated, because there is always a human element involved in this. Government can bring in policies, but by probably strictly enforcing it can be substantially reduced. It can definitely be reduced.
So summarily, that old saying still is valid: artificial intelligence should replace the natural stupidity.
One of the things that emerged was, we've seen this long, at least the last 100 years or a little more than that, this tussle between the free market and the state. The state wants more state, and the markets more markets. And when you have such instances where things go in a certain direction, they go right, they go wrong, then you see the regulators coming in, and that sort of sometimes even suffocates the market, because it has its own cost to growth. We see that in the case of bitcoins and the coin offerings that are happening across the world. And now one can at least pre-sense that there is going to be regulation around that. How do you see this moving ahead? Because the security is one part of the thing, and that could actually stifle the growth of the fintech, the overall sector. Do you see that as a challenge?
Oh, definitely. See, there is a dilemma here. Legislation is always playing a catch-up game.
Mm-hmm.
The legislations don't happen as fast as technologies evolve, because there are multiple parties involved in all these legislative processes. What one party wants, the other party doesn't. I'm not talking political parties. One section of the government wants, the other section of the government doesn't want, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So this kind of imbalance will continue to exist, because innovators don't care. They go around innovating rapidly, and the government will always be playing a catch-up game. No government can be ahead of this. Now, having said that, certain things are extremely crucial. For example, you brought Bitcoin. Bitcoin, first of all, there is no underlying either security or government behind it. It is just some kind of a token that somebody believes is, worth X dollars, and somebody believes, oh, now it is worth Y dollars, let me buy it at X, sell it at Y, and so on and so forth. The other issue with Bitcoin is the federal banks around the world are going to look at it as this is an opportunity for people to circumvent the interest rates fixed by these federal banks. In other words, the federal banks are going to lose their power, the most important thing. So, and then the other thing is, the terrorism, blackmailing, and those kind of things in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has to be treated completely, or Bitcoin or similar kind of currencies have to be treated completely different from every other technological evolution. Because today what happens is somebody steals somebody's password in Amazon or whatever it is, and then they say, okay, unless you give me X dollars, I am going to start deleting your database, 15% every hour.
Hosted situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those transactions happen through Bitcoin. The party who's benefiting from it obviously is not able to hush this through any other means, but only through Bitcoin. So Bitcoins and these kind of things are a different ball game, and the governments may have to have very strong legislation on this. I mean, that for instance, even this kind of this funding, I don't want to say social finance, but crowdfunding. The problem in crowdfunding is not too many people are aware of their own ability to take risks. Their risk tolerance, they are not aware of it. So a lot of people without familiarity may go and invest and then they lose money and then, of course, a libertarian might ask, okay, it's not the responsibility of the government to protect these people. These people have to have enough knowledge before investing. So,
willing buyer, willing seller argument.
But of all these things, the Bitcoin is, or the cryptocurrency in general, is an issue that needs to be regulated. That's my personal opinion.
Interesting. One last bit from my side is, when I look at police, maintaining law and order, there was a time when at least governments across the world experimented with a very different kind of policing. And now they're coming back to the idea of community policing. The idea that the officer is more aware than the general, impersonal exchange that they have. I believe that somewhere in the past there was community banking, where people would know, and there was some kind of a personal touch involved in banking. With the advent and the pervasiveness of fintech, we see that personal banking losing touch. How do you see the balance between this personalization? Of course, this technology gives personalization, but of an impersonal kind. How would you weigh in on that?
Well, remember we were talking about the sociological underpinnings of our problems.
Yeah.
See, today, if you look at the consumers who are in their 20s, I don't know if they even prefer this personal touch or even if they are craving for this personal touch in finance. The way they look at finance is, okay, I have this need, I don't
It's very transactional.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have this need, I don't care where the source of the money is. I want to spend the least amount of time, get this transaction done, and I want to get going with my life. Okay. So, I personally, again, it's a personal view. I personally am not very sure that in a financial transaction, I want some kind of a personal touch. Because remember, as people become more and more savvy, they are going to ask, okay, there is no personal touch from whoever is loaning me. They are going to loan me based on just data.
So it's an unbiased.
My personal situation.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's purely a transactional relationship. I'll be really surprised if somebody says, wow, I got this loan along with the personal touch.
Just a cheeky one that I have, maybe you can skip that. But when I look at investors investing in entrepreneurs, I wonder where there would be a day where the investor would not meet the entrepreneur and give the loan without meeting them. I'm sure there are some cases for that. But I think the case that I'm making, the argument that I'm making there is a personalization involved, because you want to meet the person and understand the intuitive that may not come through algorithm. So I'm appealing to that. So. But I can also understand that at the scale level, you do not have that luxury of meeting the intuitions.
Right.
And stuff.
Very true, very true. See, the investors, you are talking about one type of investors, the investors who invest in entrepreneurial ventures.
Right.
Who would like to be introduced to the founders, who would like to know the founders, their abilities, their even academic pedigree, and so on and so forth. Then there are the other group of investors who just invest without knowing anything.
Analyst reports and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Purely based, and people go buy bonds.
Yeah.
People invest in bonds without really knowing what the company is and what's the credit rating of the company is. Somebody says, some analyst says, oh, this is go ahead and invest your money. People do that also. So, investors come in all types of
spectrum. They're on a spectrum.
All sizes. So, there, the investors who invest in entrepreneurial ventures, their model of operation is very different from an individual investor or a retail investor. So this would definitely continue, because if you consider entrepreneurial ventures, it starts with an idea, and we really don't know whether the idea is going to work or not. The entrepreneur very strongly believes it's going to work. Nobody else knows. Even the entrepreneur doesn't know, but he believes or she believes that it is going to work. So on what basis do investors put money? What investors look at it is, okay, does this team have the ability to deliver? What has this team done before? Yeah, they have this product, but even if this product doesn't work, if we tell them there are changes you have to do in this product, and if you do, it will work well. And if you tell them to do those changes, does this team have the ability to do it?
Correct.
So they look at those kind of things because everybody is operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
We are going with a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
So there, the keenness to know as much as possible about the founders
is very different and
very crucial.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm good. I may only just add one sentence to the extent that there are different sections of the society which have different requirements, and fintech is an enabler in the sense it is only to ensure that it is available to larger sections of the society, and therefore there is going to be some impersonalization in the entire approach. But at the same time, as you rightly mentioned, interaction with the entrepreneurs is important. I mean, that's something which requires the touch and feel and smelling good, and therefore that part of interaction is not going to go anywhere. So I think that's absolutely relevant even today, and it was relevant maybe 30-40 years back also.
Yep. Couple of last closing questions. One is, how do you manage your inner life?
Say it.
How do you manage your inner life?
Well, to be frank, my family drives my inner life. Okay. And I'm very fortunate to have the kind of parents I have, the kind of family I have in the United States. So sometimes I even today spend a lot of time learning about Vedas and Upanishads, philosophy and so on and so forth. So I'm guided by those kind of things.
Interesting. And anything that you're reading in particular now?
There is, recently I bought 2 books. One is Catch-22 by Christopher Hitchens. Okay, I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah, Hitchens, the great Hitchens, the 4 horsemen.
So that's one thing. The other one is the CEO next door. Okay. So this is a product of research that was done in Harvard, where they have collected data about pretty close to 20,000 CEOs, and then they wanted to see what that data can be. So that's very interesting that I'm doing.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your warmth, your insight, and we look forward for more interactions with you. Thank you so much.
It was a learning opportunity for me. The questions that you asked gave me an insight into how much you know about this subject already. So I hope I added something to this conversation.
For sure.
I hope I didn't waste all your time.
No.
Both of us, we don't belong to fintech area at all. But it was, of course, pleasure listening to your views, and I'm sure we can look forward to some more value coming from you, and let the other people also benefit out of your interaction.
Yeah.